Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an almost supernatural control over their space without saying a word? They simply withdraw, and suddenly everything changes. The energy shifts, and others begin to question and pursue, experiencing a certain feeling. Imagine if you did the same thing. Stopped responding immediately to everything. Chose silence instead of an automatic reply, and opted for withdrawal rather than an outburst. What do you think would happen? Here lies the point. When you cease to be constantly available emotionally, physically, and mentally, the world around you enters a crisis because people have become accustomed to controlling you through your reactions, your impulses, and their ability to predict you. However, the day you choose to withdraw, the rules change. And those who thought they knew you realize they know nothing about you at all. Carl Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Think about this. When you become unavailable, who truly despairs, who gets upset, and who tries to provoke you just to elicit any emotional response? This reveals more about the other person than it does about you, and shows how you are still being exploited without realizing it. You continue to give to please others, to maintain peace, and not to lose people who were never really with you in the first place. With every forced yes, every immediate reaction, and every emotional interaction, you give up a part of your energy. At the end of the day, what remains is exhaustion, frustration, and an inexplicable emptiness. And I will tell you the reason. It is because you are too available to those who do not even deserve a minute of your silence. This video is not about turning your back on the world, but about choosing yourself, about learning what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, real, and integrated. This process begins when you understand that silence can be more powerful than 1,000 arguments, and that withdrawal, when it comes from awareness and not escape, is an act of strength. So, I ask you now, as I look into your eyes, how long will you continue to be controlled by the emotions of others? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone presses your wound? Perhaps it is time to cut those strings and to withdraw, to become a mystery. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. You have been taught to always be present, to respond quickly, to please, and to say yes, even when you want to say no. Since childhood, you have been programmed to believe that your worth lies in how available you are to others. But here's the truth that perhaps no one has told you so clearly. This excessive availability is not a virtue but a prison. As long as you continue to believe that you need to be available all the time, emotionally or otherwise, you will be exploited, drained, and then forgotten as soon as you become useless. Do you know why? Because constant presence makes you predictable, and everything predictable becomes a tool. People start to use you as an emotional emergency button, pressing it when they want attention, comfort, or reassurance, and then they put you back on the shelf. However, you do not notice this because you are trapped in the illusion that being there for everyone will make someone be there for you. But it does not work that way. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, loved, and recognized. And this very mask is what makes you too available. You say it is okay while you are suffocating. You reply to messages immediately, even if you are exhausted. And you explain yourself, justify yourself, and defend yourself as if you owe the world something. But the truth is, the more you place yourself at the center of other people's stage, the more you disappear from your own self. Constant availability is a subtle form of self-abandonment, a twisted way of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, and trying to control the image others have of you. This control comes at a price, and the price is your peace and your vital energy, distributed as if it were infinite, while it is actually limited, very limited. The people who want you available all the time do not actually want you. Rather, they want what you offer: reassurance, companionship, entertainment, and emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set boundaries, and when you refuse to engage these same people, get upset, accuse you, and say, you are strange not because you have changed, but because you have stopped being useful to them. This is the ultimate point. The more available you are, the less others appreciate you. Because what is abundantly available becomes an emotional doormat. No one respects what does not need to be earned, and no one values what is always there. So stop now and think. Who truly deserves your time? Who deserves your attention, your presence, your listening? Or better yet, who deserves your absence? But before answering, we need to understand something fundamental. Why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What lies behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what Carl Jung called psychic energy, and this is what we will discuss in the next part, because your energy is all you have. And if you do not learn to protect it, someone will use it against you. Carl Jung did not see the human psyche as an automatic machine that reacts to stimuli without consequences. For him, our mind is like an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes a part of that energy. The question is, do you choose where your energy goes, or do you let the world decide for you? Every time you react emotionally, you waste psychic energy. When you defend yourself against criticism that does not deserve attention, when you respond to a provocation just to prove you are right, when you engage in pointless arguments, and when you try to please those who do not appreciate you, you spend your inner strength on what does not nourish you. Jung was clear: what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People who live emotionally exhausted are not weak but misguided. And do you know what happens to someone who lives exhausted? Become weak. And when you are weak, you become prey. Opportunistic manipulators and those who are emotionally needy can sense when you do not know how to protect your energy. Ouch. Noticing that you react to everything and constantly try to solve the world's problems, which they then exploit. Jung stated that a healthy person knows how to keep energy within the system, which means knowing how to say no without guilt, how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, and how to observe before acting. Because true strength lies not in reaction, but in choosing when and how to act. This is only possible when you know yourself well enough to distinguish your own motivations. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours replaying what you should have said, or trying to understand why someone treated you harshly? This is energy drained without return. You keep ghosts alive that should have died long ago and fuel dynamics that only exist because you insist on reacting. Psychic energy is like a force field. When well protected, it creates a presence where you enter a room and gain respect without a word. However, when poorly managed, you become invisible, irritable, and fragile, and the world has no mercy on those who give in easily. Therefore, start by observing your triggers. What makes you react automatically, and what makes you lose your center? These are the subtle points where your energy escapes. And this is exactly where you need to work. Not to become cold or indifferent, but to become selective and the master of yourself. Here comes one of Jung's greatest insights. When you conserve your energy, you break the projections that others place on you. And this is very disturbing because we are now entering a dark area, the area of silent manipulation. In the next part, we will explore how opportunists feed on your energy and why your unavailability confuses them completely. Prepare to look into the eyes of those who have always drained you without you realizing it. You think you are in control, believing that your reactions are conscious choices. But the truth is darker. Most of your emotional responses are programmed, and whoever understands this exploits you easily. Opportunists do not need to raise their voices, threaten, or impose situations. They simply press the buttons you have left exposed, and you always react. Carl Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. However, there is another side to this phenomenon. While others project onto you, you also become a vessel for these images. And the more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these projections. That friend who only calls in crises, that partner who always needs you to save the situation, that person who praises you as long as you are useful, none of this is a coincidence. They are not dealing with you, but with their idea of you, with the role you agree to play. And why do you agree? Because you fear disappointment, fear not being loved, and fear abandonment. The most effective types of manipulation do not happen in shouting, but in the silence of guilt, when you feel indebted to the other person. When you believe you need to be available, to help, and to understand, even if it destroys you internally. Here is the central point. The manipulator does not only need to control you. They need you to continue with the same reactions. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, and withdrawing instead of explaining, the projections begin to collapse. The mask they put on you falls, and this leaves people confused because they no longer know who you are. Worse still, they are now forced to look at themselves, and not everyone is ready for this. Your unavailability is a threat because it forces others to confront their inner emptiness. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they do not want to hear. Then comes the attack, the criticism, and the emotional drama. Not because you are wrong, but because you have stopped being a convenient mirror. We do not illuminate ourselves by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, the other person's shadow begins to appear, and this is unbearable for those who are used to using you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to face the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or attacked because you are protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that comes after the break? Because in this very silence, a new strength is born, and this is what we will talk about now. In the next part, you will understand why silence can be the most powerful weapon in the human psyche, and how it completely changes the dynamic between you and the world. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, to respond quickly, to win pointless arguments, and to prove their point of view, even if it costs them their peace. But there is a power that few know, and even fewer master. The power of silence. Not the silence of helplessness or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, and stark silence. The kind of silence that is not absence, but intense presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe. And in observation, you see patterns that were passing unnoticed. Emotional repetitions, manipulation games, and cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for clarity, and clarity is dangerous for those who live to control. Have you noticed how some people panic when you do not respond, when you do not explain yourself, and when you simply disappear? It is not because they miss you, but because your silence deprives them of control over the narrative. As long as you speak, you are still in the game, but when you fall silent, you change the rules. And this disrupts the balance of everyone who lives off your reactions. True silence is not an absence of sound, but a control of your energy. It is a refusal to be dragged into the emotions of others, a conscious choice not to engage in battles that do not deserve your depletion. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this withdrawal, because only in silence can you hear yourself without the interference of the world. But do not be fooled. Silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played. It will make you misunderstood by those who only saw you through their projections, and it will make you seem cold, distant, and arrogant. But all of this is a reaction from those who never wanted to deal with your depth, only with your usefulness. And this is the bitter truth. The more you mature, the more selective you become with your words, because you understand that every sentence is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence is not a retreat, but sovereignty. It is the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces the other person to confront their own thoughts and inner noise. And this discomfort reveals more about them than any argument ever could. You do not need to explain your absence. It explains itself. Whoever feels threatened by it reveals how much they depended on your imbalance to maintain their control. But the most powerful silence is not the one that disturbs the other, but the one that rebuilds you from within. The silence that leads you beyond external approval, into this inner space devoid of others' demands, is where you begin to reclaim your vital energy and reconnect with your essence. This is precisely what we will discuss in the next part, because it is not enough to cut out external noise. You must relearn how to consciously use your energy to choose where it goes, and more importantly, where it should never be wasted. It is time to learn to be selective with your spirit. If you are in the process of reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries, you will find real value in the book Beyond the Shadow, which explains Jung's most important ideas and gives you tools to protect your energy, set boundaries, and reconnect with your true self. There is no benefit in understanding all of this theoretically, if in practice you continue to say yes when you mean no. Reply to messages that disturb you, engage in empty conversations, and maintain relationships that exist only out of habit. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective. This requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It is about stopping being available to anyone, at any time, for any reason. It is about taking control of your energy, your time, and your peace. And this begins with small actions. Not replying immediately. Breathing before reacting. Leaving a discussion before being drawn into the chaos. Turning off your phone without guilt. Saying not today. Saying I am not interested. And saying I will not interfere. But here is the most important part. You do not need to justify your absence, and you do not need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone except yourself, and for many this is unforgivable. Because when you refuse to explain yourself, you strip the other person of their power to keep you within an emotional narrative, where you are always the helpful, understanding, and available one. Every process of individuation involves solitude, not the solitude of depression, but a sacred solitude. A time of inner retreat where you relearn to hear your own voice without the world's interference, where you rebuild your identity not based on the gaze of others, but from your own center. You want a good measure of your progress? Notice who starts to distance themselves from you when you become more reserved. Notice who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Notice who accuses you of changing when you finally start to protect yourself. These are not signs that you are wrong, but proof that you have begun to free yourself. Unavailability is uncomfortable at first. You will feel guilty, you will think you are selfish, and you will hear that you are too harsh. But this is part of the dismantling process. You have spent your life programmed to put yourself second. It is natural for change to cause discomfort not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you say yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you affirm that your peace is worth more than any false connection. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to gain respect, even if from few. However, not everyone is ready for this kind of presence, because your emotional absence will reveal wounds they do not want to face. It will expose how much they depended on your emotional chaos to feel in control. And in this moment comes the detachment. And with detachment comes pain, loneliness, and the feeling that you are losing something. While in reality, you are only freeing yourself. But what happens next? What comes after withdrawal? What is born from silence? In the final part, we will talk about this. About the rebirth that occurs only when you have the courage to be misunderstood. To be alone and to become whole on your own. It is time to understand why the solitude of the strong is the path to true freedom. When you stop being available to everyone, something profound begins to happen. First comes the silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside you. You wonder if you have done the right thing, if you have been too harsh, if you are losing people who liked you. But gradually, the silence transforms, begins to cleanse, to calm, and to heal. Then comes solitude. Not the solitude of absence, but the solitude of complete presence to yourself. The solitude of the strong, the solitude of those who no longer betray themselves to keep others close. And in this space where there was confusion, clarity enters. Where there was anxiety, peace enters. Where there was neediness, a new strength enters, the strength to be complete within yourself. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, requires you to step away from the collective, to take off the mask, and to walk alone for a while. This is exactly what you do when you decide to become unavailable. You are not running away from the world, but returning to yourself. At this point, you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You stop being shaped by circumstances and begin to shape your reality from within. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence reveal that they never wanted you, only the role you played. And now that you no longer fit, they do not know what to do with you. This is liberation. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will move away from places, but you will reconnect with your essence. You will be misunderstood, but you will finally begin to gain respect, because when you are no longer available for just anything, you become a rare and unforgettable value. Do not be fooled. This is a rebirth, a new beginning, the beginning of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs. for mind games, or for voids disguised as affection. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, with your truth, and with your completeness. And if you have reached this point, it is because a part of you is already ready for this new path. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if the price is abandoning yourself, and that true self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you being alone for a while. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you ready to pay the price of being yourself? If this message touched you, if it made sense, write in the comments, "I choose my peace," to see how many here are ready for this stage.